Crocodile Paradox. Let's imagine this unsettling scenario. Your child has just been taken by a crocodile. You're standing at the edge of a river, heart racing, breath shaky. The crocodile stares at you with cold, unblinking eyes and says, "I will return your child, but only if you can correctly guess what I will do next." In that instant, time seems to stop. This isn't just a life or death situation. It's a logical trap. No matter how you respond, you're stepping into a paradox that has confounded philosophers for centuries. This isn't merely a riddle involving predator and prey. It's a deep, mind-bending reflection on logic, knowledge, and the limits of certainty. Let's walk carefully through the tangled reasoning. You have two possible answers to give the crocodile. Scenario 1. You guess that the crocodile will return your child. If the crocodile does intend to return the child, your guess is correct, and it fulfills its promise. Everything checks out. The child is safe. The logic holds. But if the crocodile intends to keep the child, your guess is wrong, and the crocodile is not obligated to return the child. In this case, everything stays logically consistent. The outcome depends solely on whether your prediction aligns with the crocodile's intention. Scenario 2. You guess that the crocodile will not return your child. Now, the paradox begins. If the crocodile plans to keep the child, then your prediction is correct. But that means the crocodile must return the child, since your guess was accurate. This is a contradiction. The crocodile can't both keep the child and return them at the same time. But if the crocodile does plan to return the child, then your guess was wrong, and by the deal's terms, it shouldn't have returned the child at all. Either way, the crocodile is stuck in a logical contradiction. So what's really happening here? This is a self-referential paradox, similar to the liar's paradox, where someone says, "This statement is false." If the statement is true, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it must be true. The crocodile paradox follows the same looping logic. Its promise collapses under its own contradictions. But this puzzle also goes deeper. It's not only about logic, it's about promises, truth, and trust. If a promise creates a situation where it cannot logically be kept, is it even a promise at all? And if a system is built on contradictory rules, can any outcome truly be fair? In many ways, the paradox mirrors real-world situations, legal agreements with loopholes, political promises based on conflicting conditions, or even personal choices where no option seems right. This isn't just a clever brain teaser. It's a mirror, reflecting the messy, imperfect nature of the promises we make and the expectations we hold. Let's also consider the crocodile's role. It's not a passive participant in this paradox. It's the architect of the trap. By crafting the rules to ensure a contradiction, the crocodile keeps control. It becomes a metaphor for systems of authority that are structured to maintain power, even when logic and fairness say otherwise. So, can the crocodile paradox be solved? Philosophers have debated this for centuries, and the general answer is no. The paradox isn't meant to be resolved. It's meant to reveal the flaws in our assumptions about logic, language, and justice. It's a thought experiment that challenges our belief that every question has an answer, that every problem can be reasoned through. Sometimes the true power lies not in solving the riddle, but in recognizing the trap. So if you ever find yourself face to face with a crocodile offering a deal that feels impossible, remember this paradox. Sometimes the game is rigged from the beginning, and the only winning move is to see through the illusion of choice. Dichotomy Paradox. Imagine this. Before you can reach the other side, you must first cover half the distance. But to cross that half, you must first travel half of that, and then half of that, and so on. Suddenly, you're caught in an infinite series of ever smaller steps. And if it's impossible to complete an infinite number of tasks, how can you ever get to the other side? Welcome to the Dichotomy Paradox, one of the most well-known thought experiments introduced by the ancient Greek philosopher Zeno of Elea. At first glance, the paradox feels absurd. Of course, we can cross a room. We do it every day, without even thinking. But Zeno's dichotomy paradox forces us to look deeper into the very essence of motion, infinity, and our perception of time and space. Zeno's thought experiment has intrigued thinkers for centuries. It asks a question that appears simple, yet unlocks profound complexities about how the universe truly operates. Let's break it down. The paradox begins with a seemingly obvious idea. To move from point A to point B, you must first reach the halfway point. But to reach halfway, you must first get to the quarter point, and before that, the eighth point, and so on. This sets up an infinite sequence of ever smaller distances that must be crossed. The dilemma is this: how can you complete an infinite number of tasks if you must take infinitely many steps? How is motion even possible? How can you take the first step, let alone reach your destination? Zeno's paradox reveals a fascinating conflict between our daily experiences and the logical consequences of infinitely dividing space and time. In reality, we cross rooms, walk down streets, and travel great distances effortlessly. Yet Zeno's logic asks, how can we move if every motion involves an endless number of steps? To address this, we turn to mathematics, specifically the concept of an infinite series. The distances in the paradox, and so on, form a convergent series. When all these fractions are added together, their total approaches a finite number, the full distance from point A to point B. In other words, although there are infinitely many terms, the sum is finite. This insight resolves the paradox mathematically. The infinite steps can be completed in a finite amount of time. But Zeno's dichotomy paradox isn't just a math puzzle. It raises deep philosophical questions too. If space and time are infinitely divisible, does that mean they're made up of infinitely small parts? Or is there a limit to how far they can be divided? These questions sit at the heart of debates about the fundamental nature of reality, from ancient philosophy to modern physics. In the 20th century, developments in quantum mechanics and relativity added powerful new layers to this conversation. Quantum mechanics proposes that space and time may not be infinitely divisible. Instead, they may consist of the smallest possible units, the Planck length and Planck time. These physical limits challenge the notion of infinite divisibility and offer a potential real-world resolution to Zeno's paradox. If there's a smallest possible step, then Zeno's infinite sequence doesn't actually exist in the real world. At the same time, Einstein's theory of relativity revolutionized our view of space and time, revealing that they're not separate things, but part of a single fabric called spacetime. According to relativity, motion isn't about objects moving through absolute space, but about how objects relate to one another within spacetime. This shifts our perspective. Perhaps motion isn't a sequence of discrete steps, but a continuous process unfolding in the geometry of the universe. The dichotomy paradox also forces us to grapple with the concept of infinity itself. Infinity isn't just a huge number. It's a completely different kind of idea. Zeno shows us that infinity isn't only present in the vastness of the cosmos, but hidden within the tiniest acts, like simply walking across a room. This paradox reminds us that even ordinary experiences can hold mysteries that stretch the boundaries of our understanding. But perhaps the most powerful insight from the dichotomy paradox is about the relationship between logic and reality. Logically, Zeno's reasoning suggests motion should be impossible, yet we know from experience that it happens constantly. This tension reveals the limits of logic and reminds us that while logic and mathematics are incredibly powerful, they don't always capture the full picture of our universe. Zeno's dichotomy paradox is more than just an abstract thought experiment. It's a gateway into some of the biggest questions in science and philosophy. It challenges our assumptions. It invites us to look closer. And it teaches us that even the simplest journey, crossing a room, can lead us into an infinite world of ideas. The hedonism paradox. What if the more intensely you pursue happiness, the more it seems to slip away? That's the essence of the hedonism paradox, a fascinating and counterintuitive idea that challenges some of our most fundamental beliefs about pleasure, happiness, and what it means to live a meaningful life. At its core, this paradox reveals a strange reality. When pleasure becomes the ultimate goal, it often becomes harder to attain. But why does this happen? And what can it teach us about the true nature of happiness? Let's begin by understanding what hedonism actually means. Hedonism is a philosophical view that sees pleasure as the highest good, the ultimate purpose of human existence. At first glance, this seems perfectly reasonable. Who doesn't want to feel good? Whether it's savoring a delicious meal, listening to beautiful music, or spending time with people we care about, pleasure is a universal human experience. Hedonism argues that maximizing these experiences is the key to living our best lives. But here's where the hedonism paradox flips that idea upside down. It suggests that the more intensely we focus on achieving pleasure for its own sake, the more elusive it becomes. Imagine this. You're at a party, set on having the perfect night. You plan every detail, your outfit, who to talk to, what to eat and drink. But as the evening unfolds, you find yourself constantly evaluating how much fun you're having. You compare your experience with others, question whether you're enjoying yourself enough, and end up feeling disappointed. The harder you try to feel happy, the more distant happiness becomes. This is the hedonism paradox in action. It's not that pleasure is wrong or harmful. The paradox arises because fixating on pleasure can actually undermine your ability to enjoy it. That's because happiness is often not something we achieve directly. It's a byproduct of doing things that matter to us. When you focus too much on being happy, you become hyper aware of your emotions. This self-consciousness creates pressure and anxiety, making it more difficult to relax and enjoy the moment. In psychology, this is called the paradoxical effect. When you obsess over an outcome, like happiness, you lose connection with the process, which is where true joy is often found. Philosophers and psychologists have reflected on this paradox for centuries. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, famously wrote, "Happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue." In other words, happiness emerges as a result of living a meaningful life, not from chasing pleasure directly. Frankl's view aligns with modern research in positive psychology, which finds that people who prioritize purpose and connection over pleasure tend to report greater life satisfaction. But don't mistake this to mean pleasure isn't important. The hedonism paradox simply reminds us that pleasure is best experienced indirectly, as something that arises naturally from engaging activities. Think about a hobby you truly enjoy: painting, hiking, playing music. When you're deeply immersed, you're not thinking, "How happy am I right now?" You're just enjoying the moment. Ironically, It's this lack of focus on happiness that often brings deeper and longer lasting joy. The paradox also raises broader questions about the world we live in. We're constantly surrounded by messages that tell us to chase happiness through consumerism, social media, and self help. Advertisements suggest that the right car, vacation, or gadget will make us happy. Social media shows us curated snapshots of others' perfect lives, reinforcing the belief that we should be chasing happiness constantly. But the hedonism paradox reminds us that kind of pursuit can backfire. It challenges us to reconsider what it really means to live a fulfilling life and to resist the temptation to measure our worth by how happy we appear to be. So, how do we escape the trap of the hedonism paradox? One strategy is to focus on intrinsic goals rather than extrinsic ones. Intrinsic goals are things we value for their own sake, like personal growth, deep relationships, and creativity. Extrinsic goals, such as wealth, fame, or image, are often pursued in the hope that they'll bring happiness. Research consistently shows that people who prioritize intrinsic goals tend to be happier and more fulfilled because they're not chasing external validation. Another powerful approach is to cultivate mindfulness, the practice of being fully present in the here and now. Mindfulness helps you let go of the constant need to evaluate your experience and instead invites you to simply be in the moment. By focusing on what you're doing, rather than how it makes you feel, you loosen the grip of self-consciousness that fuels the paradox. The hedonism paradox also encourages us to embrace the full range of human emotions. Happiness is just one part of the experience. Life also includes sorrow, frustration, boredom, and uncertainty. By accepting all of these emotions as valid parts of life, we cultivate a deeper kind of peace. And paradoxically, happiness often finds us when we're not even looking for it. In the end, the hedonism paradox isn't just a puzzle about pleasure, it's a profound life lesson. It teaches us that happiness isn't something we can capture or cling to. It's something we stumble upon while living fully and authentically. It reminds us to shift our focus from chasing happiness to building a life filled with meaning, connection, and purpose. So the next time you feel pressure to be happy, pause. Remember the lesson of the hedonism paradox. Let go of the chase. Be present. Live deeply. And in doing so, trust that joy will come to you in its own time. After all, happiness isn't just about where you're headed, it's about how you travel. And sometimes, the best way to find it is to stop searching and just live. The Ship of Theseus. If you gradually replaced every single part of a ship, its planks, its sails, its wheel, until none of the original components remained, would it still be considered the same ship? This classic thought experiment, known as the Ship of Theseus, is one of the most enduring and thought-provoking paradoxes in all of philosophy. It doesn't just make us rethink how we view objects, it compels us to explore the deeper, more complex nature of identity itself. So, what exactly defines something's identity? Is it the material it's made from? The way it's assembled? Or is it something more abstract? Imagine a ship docked in a harbor. Over the years, it begins to show signs of aging. Some parts start to rot or wear out. First, the crew replaces a few planks, then a mast, then another plank. Gradually, over time, every part of the ship is replaced. It still sails the seas, carries its crew, and looks exactly like the same ship. But is it really still the same Ship of Theseus? And if it isn't, when did it stop being that ship? Was it after the first plank was swapped out? The 10th? or only after all of them had been changed? Now, let's take the question a step further. What if someone came along and collected all the discarded, original pieces of the ship and reassembled them elsewhere? Which one is now the real Ship of Theseus? Is it the ship made from the original parts, now reconstructed, or the one that's been gradually repaired and updated over time? Or maybe, just maybe, are both versions, in some strange and meaningful way, the same ship? This paradox doesn't provide neat, tidy answers. Instead, it wraps us in layers of questions. Questions that go straight to the heart of what identity truly means. The Ship of Theseus isn't just a story about ships. It's a metaphor for everything in life that undergoes change over time. Think about yourself. The cells in your body are constantly dying and being replaced. After a few decades, almost all the cells you were born with are gone. Are you still the same person? If yes, what is it that makes you you? Is it your memories, your personality, or is it something deeper, more intangible? This paradox also makes us reconsider the objects we surround ourselves with. Take an old car, for example. If you gradually replace every part of it, is it still the same car? Created over time, changed by design, like the Ship of Theseus. It challenges the idea that identity is fixed. It shows us that identity may be far more fluid than we typically believe. Philosophers have debated this paradox for centuries. Some argue that identity is connected to continuity of function or purpose. In this view, the Ship of Theseus remains the same ship as long as it continues to sail and fulfill its role, regardless of what materials make it up. Others believe identity is rooted in the original material, that the ship rebuilt using the original parts is the true Ship of Theseus, because it retains the substance it once had. And then there's a third idea, one that questions whether identity is ever a single, fixed thing at all. This perspective sees the Ship of Theseus not as one ship or the other, but as both. Identity, in this sense, is not an either slash or equation. It's a both slash and concept. It adapts and evolves, shaped by context and perspective. In this way, the Ship of Theseus challenges us to reconsider the boundaries we draw around identity, whether for ships, objects, or ourselves. The paradox also has powerful implications when we think about personal growth and transformation. As individuals, we're always evolving. Our beliefs, values, and experiences continuously shape who we are, often in ways we don't even notice. When you reflect on who you were 5, 10, or 20 years ago, you might feel like a completely different person. But are you? Or are you like the Ship of Theseus, a continuation of the same essence, carried forward through time and change? This paradox even extends to how we understand societies, cultures, and traditions. A city may rebuild its roads, buildings, and infrastructure over the centuries, but it still feels like the same place. Languages evolve, shedding old words and adopting new ones, yet they remain recognizable. Traditions adapt and change, passed from one generation to the next, but they still carry a sense of continuity. The Ship of Theseus reminds us, identity isn't about clinging to the past. It's about moving forward, navigating change, while still holding onto a thread that connects us to what came before. So, how do we resolve the Ship of Theseus? The truth is, we don't. Like all great paradoxes, it doesn't offer a final answer. Instead, it invites us to explore identity in ways that are more complex, more layered, and ultimately more human. It shows us that change doesn't erase the past. it builds upon it. Whether it's a ship, a car, a city, or a person, identity isn't something fixed. It's a process, a journey, and a story we tell about ourselves. The Ship of Theseus teaches us that even as we change, something essential remains. What that something is may depend on how we view the world. But the paradox reminds us identity isn't a simple formula. It's a dance between what was and what is becoming, between the past and the future, between the parts and the whole. And maybe that's exactly what makes it so profound. The Stockdale Paradox. Imagine enduring years of unimaginable suffering and not only surviving, but emerging from it stronger. How would you manage such a feat? This is the essence of the Stockdale Paradox, a concept that uncovers the fragile yet powerful balance between hope and harsh realism. Named after Admiral James Stockdale, a U.S. Navy officer and prisoner of war during the Vietnam War, this paradox challenges everything we assume about optimism, resilience, and survival. The Stockdale Paradox is rooted in Stockdale's harrowing experience as a POW in Vietnam. For 8 years, he suffered through brutal torture, complete isolation, and constant uncertainty. Many of his fellow prisoners didn't make it, ultimately crushed by despair or broken spirits. But Stockdale survived, and when asked how, his response revealed a paradox that has since inspired leaders, psychologists, and thinkers around the world. Stockdale said it wasn't the optimists who made it through. In fact, they were the ones who often didn't survive. They were the ones who said, "We'll be out by Christmas," and Christmas would come and go. Then they'd say, "We'll be out by Easter," and Easter would come and go. Then Thanksgiving, then Christmas again, and they died of a broken heart. His insight? Survival isn't about blind optimism or wishful thinking. It's about holding two seemingly contradictory beliefs at once. Unwavering faith that you will prevail in the end, and the discipline to confront the brutal facts of your current reality. This is the Stockdale Paradox, the ability to balance hope with realism, to believe in the future without denying the pain of the present. It's a paradox because it runs counter to the way we often think about positivity. Blind optimism can lead to crushing disillusionment when reality doesn't match our expectations. But giving up hope altogether is just as dangerous. The true power lies in finding a balance between these two extremes. Let's break down why this mindset is so effective. On one hand, having faith in a better future gives you the motivation to keep going. Without hope, despair can take over, making it nearly impossible to push through difficult times. On the other hand, ignoring the severity of your situation can leave you unprepared. By fully embracing the harsh truths of your reality, you build mental resilience and develop strategies to survive, even if those strategies are painful or difficult to implement. The Stockdale Paradox teaches us that hope and realism aren't opposites, they're complementary forces. For Stockdale, this balance played out in a literal life and death situation, but the lessons apply well beyond the battlefield to business, relationships, personal growth, and everyday life. Take, for example, a failing project. Blind optimism might lead you to ignore warning signs and keep pushing forward without a real plan. But pure pessimism could cause you to quit too soon. The Stockdale Paradox offers a third approach. Recognize the challenges honestly, while still maintaining your belief that you'll find a way through. This mindset is especially important in times of crisis, whether it's a global pandemic, economic uncertainty, or a personal struggle. When the future feels unpredictable, it's easy to either cling to false hope or fall into despair. But the Stockdale Paradox encourages us to do neither. Instead, it urges us to face reality head on, while also holding on to belief. The belief that we are strong enough to endure and overcome whatever lies ahead. Psychologists call this approach adaptive resilience. Resilient individuals don't deny or minimize their difficulties, but they also don't let those difficulties define them. They adapt, finding ways to grow and persevere even through the darkest times. The Stockdale Paradox captures this beautifully. It shows that resilience isn't about avoiding pain. It's about facing pain with purpose. It also warns us about the danger of false hope. Stockdale's fellow prisoners, the ones who clung to unrealistic timelines, were emotionally shattered when those expectations were repeatedly unmet. Their misplaced optimism left them vulnerable. But that doesn't mean hope is the enemy. It means we need to ground our hope in truth. Hope that is tethered to a clear-eyed understanding of the situation becomes a source of strength, not a weakness. And importantly, the Stockdale Paradox isn't just about surviving hardship. It's about growing through it. Stockdale didn't just make it through his years as a prisoner. He came out of that experience with a deeper understanding of himself and the world around him. He found meaning in his suffering and used it to grow and to inspire others. That's a vital part of the paradox. Even in the darkest of moments, we can uncover a sense of purpose, a reason to keep going. So, how can we apply the Stockdale Paradox to our own lives? First, we must practice radical honesty about our circumstances. That means confronting facts, even when they're deeply uncomfortable. Denial may feel easier in the short term, but it leaves us exposed in the long run. Second, we need to cultivate a deep and abiding faith in our ability to overcome challenges. This isn't about naive positivity. It's a belief built on the truth that we are capable of enduring and adapting. The paradox also calls us to build emotional flexibility. It's not about suppressing fear, doubt, or despair. It's about allowing those emotions to exist while still holding onto hope and determination. Striking that balance takes self-awareness, reflection, and a willingness to lean into discomfort as part of the path forward. In the end, the Stockdale Paradox isn't just a lesson in how to survive. It's a blueprint for living a meaningful life. It teaches us that the human spirit is incredibly resilient when we learn to balance hope with realism, faith with action, and optimism with pragmatism. Even in the face of profound suffering, we can discover strength, purpose, and growth. So, the next time you're staring down a challenge that feels overwhelming, remember Admiral Stockdale's wisdom. Hold on to the belief that you will prevail, but never shy away from confronting the truth of your situation, because in that delicate balance lies the power not just to survive, but to thrive. And that is the paradox's greatest lesson, that hope and honesty, together, are the keys to enduring life's greatest tests.